His fist stopped a hair's breadth from her throat while 19 SEALs lay groaning on the floor. And in the trembling silence, Bruce Lee's dark eyes locked onto hers with something far more dangerous than combat: recognition. Elena's pulse hammered not from fear, but from the devastating heat of his knuckles still hovering against her skin, his breath ragged, his whisper barely audible. "You didn't flinch." Bruce Lee was challenged by 20 Navy SEALs at once. 5 seconds later, room fell silent. They told Captain Elena Vasquez she would be observing a routine hand-to-hand combat evaluation at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado. They told her the guest instructor was a civilian consultant. They did not tell her that the man standing barefoot at the center of the gymnasium floor was someone whose presence would crack her life open like a fist through drywall. 20 of the Navy's most elite operators circled him. He stood 5'7", 140 pounds, wearing a black cotton shirt with the sleeves torn off. He said nothing. He didn't shift his weight. He didn't scan the room. He breathed. That was all. And then the first SEAL lunged, and 5 seconds later, every man in that circle was on the floor, and the only sound in that enormous room was the squeak of Elena's boot as she took one involuntary step forward. What she didn't know yet was that the man at the center of that silence carried something inside his blood that was killing him. What she didn't know was that the classified military file she'd been assigned to bury contained the one piece of information that could save his life. And what she would never have believed, not in that moment, not with 20 unconscious operators at his feet, was that before the month was over, the most dangerous man she had ever seen would stand in front of her shaking, unable to finish a single sentence, because the words he needed to say required a kind of courage his body had never been trained for. This is that story. The gymnasium smelled like iodine. Elena noticed it the moment she stepped through the double doors. Sharp, medicinal, wrong for a training facility that should have reeked of sweat and rubber matting. She filed it the way she filed everything, silently, precisely, in a mental cabinet she would open later when she was alone and the world was quiet enough to think. She was 29, a naval intelligence officer with a specialization in threat assessment, and she had been summoned from Washington with 48 hours' notice and no explanation beyond a single line in her orders: evaluate and contain. The bleachers were empty. The overhead fluorescents buzzed at a frequency that made her back teeth ache. And at the center of the regulation sparring mat, surrounded by 20 SEALs in gray PT gear, stood a man who looked like he had been carved from something harder than bone. His name was in the file she hadn't opened yet. She would learn it later. In this moment all she had was the physical fact of him: the black cotton shirt, the bare feet, the forearms roped with veins that stood out against golden skin. His hair was cut close, sharp at the temples. His jaw was set but not clenched. His eyes moved across the circle of men around him without hurry, and she thought, not with admiration, not yet, just with the clinical clarity of her training, that he was counting them the way a mathematician counts variables, not with fear, with interest. Commander Richard Holt stood beside her at the edge of the mat, arms folded, his dress whites immaculate. He was her superior officer, the man who had signed her transfer orders, and the man who in 6 days she would learn had committed a crime so precise and so buried that it had taken the destruction of 3 careers to keep it hidden. Civilian consultant, Holt said. Name's Lee, martial arts expert. Some kind of legend in his world. His world, Elena repeated. The fighting world, Hollywood, Hong Kong, whatever. Pentagon wants to know if his methods have tactical application. Holt's voice carried the particular flatness of a man who had already decided the answer was no. Your job is documentation. Watch, evaluate, write the report that puts this circus to bed. Elena opened her mouth to ask why a threat assessment specialist had been pulled across the country to write a training evaluation, and then the man at the center of the mat, Lee, raised one hand palm open, and every SEAL in the circle went still. He spoke. His voice was not loud. It was not deep. It carried the way a tuning fork carries, vibrating at exactly the right frequency to make the air around it change. You are afraid, he said. Not of me, of what you'll learn about yourselves in the next 5 seconds. He paused. Come. 3 of them moved first. Elena saw the coordinated advance, left flank, right flank, direct center, and she saw the training in it, the thousands of hours of close quarters combat that made these men weapons in their own right. The center man threw a straight right cross at Lee's jaw. Lee was not there. He had moved, not dodged, not ducked, moved, the way water moves around a stone, and what happened next was so fast that Elena's conscious mind simply stopped trying to process it and let her instincts record instead. Bodies hit the mat. The sound was not dramatic, it was quiet. A series of flat, soft impacts like sandbags dropped from a low height. She counted 3, 5, 8, 12. Lee's hands moved in sequences she couldn't track. A palm strike here, a redirection there, a hip pivot that sent a 220-pound operator spinning into two of his teammates. He didn't punch. He didn't kick. He touched. He placed his hands on men's bodies at exact angles, and they simply went down, as if their own momentum had betrayed them, and he was merely the one who noticed. 5 seconds, maybe 6. Elena would argue with herself about that extra second for weeks. 20 men, all on the mat, some groaning, some blinking at the ceiling in genuine confusion. One, a lieutenant she recognized from a briefing in Virginia, was laughing softly, his hand on his chest, trying to figure out why he was on his back. Lee stood at the center. He was not breathing hard. He was not sweating. The iodine smell was stronger now, and Elena realized with a lurch that it was coming from him, not from a wound, from his skin, something chemical, something metabolic, something her training told her was medically significant. She took one step forward. Her boots squeaked on the polished floor. Lee's eyes found hers. For a single, terrible second, she felt the full weight of his attention. It was not aggressive. It was not sexual. It was total. He looked at her the way he had looked at the circle of men, with absolute presence, as if the act of seeing her required his entire being. Then he looked away, and Elena's hand was shaking, and Commander Holt was already talking about debrief schedules, and the world moved on. It moved on for exactly 11 hours. At 2300, Elena sat in the temporary office she'd been assigned, a windowless room in the administrative building with a metal desk and a lamp that hummed, and opened the classified file. Lee's file. The real one, not the Pentagon press packet about civilian consultation. The one stamped with a classification level she had only seen twice in her career. His full name was Bruce Jun Fan Lee, born in San Francisco, raised in Hong Kong, returned to the United States at 18, founded a martial arts discipline that had attracted the attention of military trainers across 4 branches. That much was public record. The classified portion began on page 6. He was dying. The file used clinical language. Progressive neuromuscular deterioration, etiology unknown, first documented 18 months prior. But Elena read through the jargon and found the human truth underneath. His body was attacking itself. The speed, the precision, the impossible physical control she had witnessed that morning. All of it was burning through him, consuming his nervous system the way a fire consumes its own fuel. The iodine smell was a byproduct of an experimental medication he was taking to slow the deterioration. It was not working, and on page 9, she found the section that made her close the file and put both hands flat on the desk and breathe through her nose until the nausea passed. Project Meridian, a joint CIA-Navy research program from 1965. Experimental performance-enhancing protocols tested on foreign nationals during training exchanges. One subject, a 19-year-old martial artist from Hong Kong, selected without his knowledge or consent, dosed through contaminated nutritional supplements over a period of 14 months. The program was terminated. The records were sealed. The subject was never informed. The subject was Bruce Lee, and the officer who had overseen Project Meridian, who had signed the dosing orders, who had buried the files and built a career on the silence, was Commander Richard Holt. Elena stared at the wall. She had been sent here to write a report that would discredit Lee's methods, provide bureaucratic cover for Holt's program, and ensure that the connection between a dying man and the poison in his blood was never discovered. Evaluate and contain, not the threat, the truth. She picked up the file. She put it in her bag. She walked to the gymnasium. He was still there, alone now. The lights were dimmed to a single bank over the sparring mat, and he was moving through a form, slow, deliberate, each gesture precise, and the iodine smell was so strong she could taste it on her tongue, bitter and wrong. She stopped at the edge of the mat. He did not stop moving. He completed the sequence, lowered his hands, and turned to face her. "You're the one who stepped forward," he said. "I'm Captain Elena Vasquez, Naval Intelligence." Intelligence? His mouth did something that was not quite a smile. "Is that what they're calling it now? Mr. Lee, I need to ask you some questions about your medical condition." He went very still. Not the stillness of surprise, the stillness of a man who had been waiting for something and had finally heard it arrive. "What medical condition?" "The one that makes you smell like a hospital." He stared at her. Then he sat down on the mat, cross-legged, and gestured to the space across from him. "Sit." "I'd prefer to stand." "I know. Sit anyway." She sat. The mat was cool through her uniform trousers. They were 4 feet apart. The fluorescent light above them hummed. "Ask," he said. "Who told you that you were sick?" "My body told me. 14 months ago, my hands stopped obeying me for 3 seconds during a film take." He held up his right hand. It was steady. 3 seconds. For anyone else, nothing. For me, a death sentence. "And the medication?" "A Navy doctor, assigned to me through this consultation program. He said it would help with neural conductivity." He paused. "It tastes like pennies, and it makes my skin smell like something that should be kept in a cabinet. But it's better than the alternative." "Which is?" "Losing." He said it simply. "Losing control of what I've spent my entire life building. Losing the ability to move the way I was meant to move. I am not afraid of death, Captain. I am afraid of stillness." Elena felt the file in her bag against her hip. She had the truth. She could give it to him now. She could tell him that he had been poisoned, that the medication was a second-generation variant of the same compound that was killing him, that the Navy doctor reporting to Holt was managing his decline, not treating it. She could blow the entire operation open with 6 sentences, and Holt would have her court-martialed within the hour. The file would vanish. Lee would die without ever knowing why, and the only person who had both the clearance and the will to help him would be in a military prison. So she said nothing about the file. Instead, she said, "I'm going to be observing your sessions for the next 2 weeks." "I know. I'll be writing a report." "I know that too. I want you to understand that I'm not your enemy." He studied her. "I didn't think you were. You stepped forward. Everyone else stepped back." The next morning, Holt called a briefing for the SEAL team and the training staff. 40 people in a room with folding chairs and a podium. Elena stood at the back. Lee stood at the side, arms folded, watching. Holt introduced him formally. "This is Mr. Lee, our civilian combat consultant for the next 14 days. He will be working with select teams on advanced hand-to-hand methodology." He paused, and his eyes swept the room with the practiced authority of a man who understood that power was a performance. "Captain Vasquez will be serving as his military liaison and documentation officer. Any questions or concerns about Mr. Lee's methods should be directed to her." It was a leash. Elena recognized it. By naming her as Lee's handler, Holt had made her responsible for everything Lee did, everything Lee said, and most importantly, everything Lee discovered. If anything went wrong, she would be the one holding the bag. But Lee did something unexpected. He stepped forward, he looked at the room, and he said, "Captain Vasquez is not my liaison. She is my colleague. I chose to work with her. I do not work with people I do not choose." He turned to Holt. "Is that a problem, Commander?" The room was silent. Holt's jaw worked. Elena felt 40 pairs of eyes on her and kept her face absolutely neutral. "No problem," Holt said. Lee nodded and walked back to his position at the side of the room. As he passed Elena, his hand rose, slowly, deliberately, giving her time to see it coming, time to refuse, and touched her shoulder. 2 fingers, light, brief, an acknowledgement. She felt the heat of his skin through her uniform blouse. She felt the tremor in his fingertips, fine, almost invisible, the kind of tremor that no one in this room would notice except her, because she had read page 6. He was getting worse. 3 days passed. Elena observed his training sessions, documented his methods, and filed reports that said exactly enough to satisfy Holt and exactly nothing that could be used against Lee. At night, she returned to her windowless office and studied the Meridian file, cross-referencing the chemical compounds with medical databases she accessed through channels that would end her career if anyone discovered them. She found what she was looking for on the 3rd night, a counteragent, a protein sequence that could neutralize the Meridian compound. It had been developed in 1967, tested once, and shelved. The formula was in the file. It could be synthesized by any competent military pharmacist. She had the cure. She had carried it in her bag from the moment she read page 9. On the fourth night, he found her. She was sitting on the bleachers in the empty gymnasium, the file open on her lap, when the side door opened and Lee walked in. He was wearing a white cotton shirt, unbuttoned at the collar. His feet were bare on the polished floor. The iodine smell preceded him, sharper than it had been 3 days ago. "You haven't slept," he said. "Neither have you." He sat beside her, not close, not far. The exact distance that allowed her to feel the warmth of his body without touching it. She realized he calibrated proximity the way other people calibrated words, with intention. "Tell me something true," he said. "Not something useful, something true." "You terrify me." "Good. Now tell me why." "Because I've never met anyone who is so completely inside their own body. You don't live in your head. You live in your hands, your feet, your breath, and I live entirely in my head. You make me aware of everything I've abandoned." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "May I ask you something?" "Yes." "When I touched your shoulder 3 days ago, your pulse jumped. Not from fear, from recognition. What did you recognize?" "The tremor." His breath changed. She heard it, a slight catch, a held beat, a release. "No one else has noticed," he said. "No one else was looking." He turned his body toward her. "Elena." It was the first time he'd used her name, not her rank, not captain. "Elena, I want to show you something," he said. "It requires trust, and it requires you to close your eyes." "What is it?" "The way I see the world. I can show you. Through contact, my hand on yours, nothing more, but only if you want it." She closed her eyes. She placed her hand on her knee, palm up. She waited. His palm settled over hers. The touch was dry, warm, precise. His fingers did not close. They rested. And then she felt it, his pulse, transmitted through the pressure of his skin against hers, steady and deliberate, and beneath it, like a second heartbeat, the tremor. He was letting her feel what he hid from everyone else. He was giving her the truth of his body. "This is what's happening to me," he said. "You feel it. The signal is degrading. My hands will be the first to go, then my feet, then my core. When it reaches my diaphragm, I stop breathing." She opened her eyes. His face was close. His gaze was steady. "How long?" she asked. "Weeks, maybe less. The medication isn't working anymore. It may never have been working." She wanted to tell him everything. The file, Meridian, the counteragent. But Holt had eyes everywhere, and if she revealed what she knew before she could synthesize the cure, he would destroy the formula and accelerate the timeline. She needed time. She needed Lee alive long enough to save him. So she did the only thing she could think of that would keep him close, without telling him why. She leaned forward and kissed him. His hand tightened on hers, not grabbing, holding, the way a man holds something he is afraid to drop. His mouth was warm. He tasted like green tea and copper. He kissed her back with the same precision he brought to everything, deliberate, attentive, reading her responses the way he read an opponent's stance. When her breath quickened, he slowed. When she pressed closer, he matched her. His free hand rose to the side of her neck, 2 fingers first, asking, and when she tilted her head into his touch, the full palm. "We shouldn't do this here," she said against his mouth. "No." "My quarters. Now." "Is that an order, Captain?" "It's a request from Elena." They walked through the dark corridors of the base, 6 inches apart, not touching. Her room was small, a single bed, a desk, a window that looked out over the Pacific. She locked the door. He stood in the center of the room, and the moonlight through the window cut across his chest where the shirt fell open. "Tell me what you want," he said. "Specifically. I will not assume. I want your hands on me." "Where?" "Everywhere. But slow. I want to feel you the way you feel the world." He crossed the space between them. His fingers found the top button of her uniform blouse. He paused. "Yes," she said. He opened the first button, the second, the third. Each one a separate act, a separate permission requested through the pause before his fingers moved and granted through her steady breathing. He pushed the blouse off her shoulders and it fell to the floor. His palms flattened against her collarbone, slid down to the swell of her chest, and stopped. Still yes? Still yes. He unhooked her bra with one hand, and she felt the tremor again, his fingers shaking against her skin, not from desire alone but from the disease that was eating through his nerves. And she took his wrists and held them, steadying him. He looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw something unguarded in his face. Gratitude. Raw, ungovernable gratitude that someone was touching the broken parts of him without flinching. She pulled him closer. His mouth found her throat, her collarbone, the space between her breasts. His breath was hot against her skin. She reached down and pulled his shirt over his head, and his body was exactly what she had imagined, and nothing like what she had imagined, compact, sculpted, every muscle defined, but warm, human, alive beneath her palms. She ran her hands down his chest to his stomach, felt the muscles contract, heard the low sound he made in his throat. "Bed," she said. They fell onto the narrow mattress together. He braced himself above her on his forearms, and the iodine smell of his skin mixed with the salt of his sweat, and she pulled him down against her by the back of his neck and kissed him hard enough to feel his control break for a half-second, his hips pressing into hers, his breath stuttering. She hooked her leg over his hip and pulled. "This," she said. "Now." "You're certain?" "Bruce, now." He moved against her, and she felt the extraordinary control he had over every inch of his body, the precision and the deliberateness of his weight, his angle, the way he found the exact rhythm she needed without being told because he was reading her the way he read everything, through contact, through breath, through the minute signals of her muscles beneath his hands. She gasped and he slowed, checking her face, and she grabbed the back of his head and said, "Don't stop." He didn't stop. He built the intensity the way he built a form, each movement connected to the next, each one a continuation and an escalation, and when she arched beneath him, he held her hips steady with both hands and gave her exactly what she was reaching for. She came with her teeth against his shoulder, tasting the iodine on his skin, feeling the tremor in his hands where they gripped her, and the sound she made was not quiet, and she did not care. He followed her. His entire body locked, his forehead dropped against her neck, and he was still for a moment that felt like the gymnasium, that same total, devastating silence. Then he breathed. A long, shaking exhale against her collarbone. He rolled onto his back. He stared at the ceiling. The moonlight crossed his chest. The tremor in his hands was visible now, fine vibrations that he could not stop. "Stay," she said. "I should go. You have a report to file in the morning. Your career, Elena." "Stay anyway." He left. She heard his bare feet on the corridor floor, soft and precise, and then silence, and then the iodine smell fading from her sheets, and she lay in the dark and gripped the pillow and thought, "I have the cure. I have to move faster." The next morning she walked into the gymnasium for the training session and could not look at him. She stood at her usual position by the bleachers and watched him work with a squad of SEALs on joint lock techniques, and every time his hands moved, she remembered those hands on her body, the tremor, the precision, the way he had asked before every escalation and waited for her answer. He caught her eye once. His expression did not change. He continued the demonstration. She wanted to scream. At lunch, Petty Officer Maria Santos, the base medic who had become the closest thing Elena had to a friend in Coronado, sat down across from her in the mess hall and said, "You look like someone who got exactly what she wanted and is furious about it. I don't know what you're talking about. Honey, you've got a bite mark on your collarbone and you're blushing so hard I can check your blood pressure from across the table. Was it the civilian? The pretty one who moves like water?" Elena put her fork down. "What do you recommend?" Maria leaned forward. "You want to know how to handle a man who's better at everything physical than you are? Exhaust him. Wear him out. Use every tool in your arsenal until his genius brain shuts off, and all that's left is a man who needs you more than he needs to be in control. Then, and only then, you'll see who he really is." Elena stared at her. "That is absurdly specific advice. I was married to a Force Recon Marine for 11 years. Trust me." That night, Elena went to the gymnasium at 2200. He was there. She locked the door. She walked across the mat, took his face in both hands, and kissed him before he could speak. "What are you doing?" he asked against her mouth. "Exhausting you." She pushed him down onto the mat. She straddled his hips. She took his wrists and pinned them above his head, and he let her. He could have reversed the hold in a fraction of a second, and they both knew it, and the fact that he didn't was the most intimate thing she had ever experienced. She undressed him slowly, methodically, the way he calibrated everything, and when he reached for her, she pressed his hands back down. "My turn," she said. She took her time. She learned his body the way he had learned hers, through contact, through response, through the sounds he made when she found the places that broke his focus. She kissed the hollow of his throat, the ridgeline of his hip, the inside of his wrist where the tremor was worst. She took him apart piece by piece until his breathing was ragged and his hands were fisted in the mat beneath him, and his legendary control was in ruins. When she finally let him move, he surged up and pulled her against him with a sound that was not a word in any language, and they came together on the gymnasium floor, with the fluorescent lights buzzing above them, and the smell of iodine and sweat, and something that burned bright enough to make her eyes sting. After, he slept. For the first time he slept, his head on her chest, his arm across her waist, his breath slow and deep and even. The tremor in his hands quieted. She held him and stared at the ceiling and counted the hours she had left to save his life. He woke before dawn. He looked up at her with an expression she had never seen on his face. Open, soft, young. "What do you need?" he asked. "Not what do you want. What do you need? I need you to trust me, even when what I do doesn't make sense." Done. The next 4 nights, she went to him. And each night, the tremor was worse. By the 3rd night, his right hand seized during a training demonstration, locked into a claw for 7 seconds while 20 SEALs watched, and he covered it by transitioning into a grappling technique that used the fist as a hook. Only Elena saw the truth. Only Elena smelled the iodine spike that accompanied the episode, sharp enough to cut through the gymnasium air and settle on her tongue like a warning. She was running out of time. On the 8th night, he came to her office. He sat across from her at the metal desk and put his hands flat on the surface, and she could see them shaking in the lamplight. "I'm dying," he said. "I've accepted that, but I need to understand why. My body should not be failing this way. I am 32 years old. I have lived clean. I have trained with integrity. There is something wrong at a level deeper than any doctor has been willing to look." Elena pulled the file from her bag. She placed it on the desk between them. She did not open it. "If I show you this," she said, "I lose everything. My career, my clearance, probably my freedom." "Then don't show me." "I have to, because the answer is in here and so is the cure, and I have been sitting on both for 8 days because I was trying to synthesize the counteragent in secret, and I can't do it alone." She opened the file. She talked for 3 hours. She told him about Meridian, about the contaminated supplements, about Holt, about the counteragent that could neutralize the compound in his blood, the formula she had memorized and the pharmacist she needed to compound it, and the reason she hadn't told him sooner, because Holt was watching. Because the evidence would be destroyed, because she needed enough time to build a case that couldn't be buried. He listened. He did not interrupt. When she finished, his hands were still on the desk, trembling, and the iodine smell was so strong it made her eyes water. "You carried this," he said, "since the first night." "Yes. And you stayed, you touched me, you held me while I slept, knowing that the man who poisoned me was your commanding officer, knowing that every moment you spent with me was another charge they could bring against you." "Yes." He stood. He walked around the desk. He knelt in front of her chair. He took her hands. "I need to say something to you," he said. "I have needed to say it for days. Elena, His eyes rolled back. His hands clenched around hers with convulsive force and then released. He fell sideways. His body hit the floor and began to seize, his spine arching, his heels drumming against the tile, and the iodine smell erupted from his skin in a wave so concentrated she gagged. "No," she said. She was on the floor beside him, turning him on his side, protecting his head with her hands. "No, no, no, not yet, not now." The seizure lasted 40 seconds. When it stopped, he was unconscious. His breathing was shallow and irregular. His skin was gray. Elena stood. She picked up the desk phone. She dialed Maria Santos. "I need you in Admin Building C, room 114 right now. Bring a crash bag in the following compounds." She recited the formula from memory. "Don't ask questions. Don't tell anyone, especially not Commander Holt." Maria arrived in 11 minutes. She took one look at Lee on the floor and said, "How long?" 40-second tonic-clonic seizure. He's postictal. Breathing is depressed. "The compounds you requested, I can mix them, but this isn't any pharmacology I've seen." "What is this?" "It's a counteragent to an experimental neurotoxin that was administered to him without his knowledge in 1965 by a United States Navy program overseen by Commander Holt." Maria's hands stopped moving. She looked at Elena. "Mix it," Elena said. "Now, he's dying." Maria mixed it. She drew the solution into a syringe. Elena took it. "I need you to step back," Elena said. "Captain..." "Maria, step back. If this goes wrong, you need deniability." Elena knelt beside Lee. She found the vein in his left arm. She administered the counteragent. And then she sat beside him on the cold tile floor of a windowless office in Coronado, California, and held his hand and waited. His breathing changed first. Deeper, steadier. His skin, gray moments before, warmed under her fingers. The iodine smell began to thin, not vanishing but softening, losing its medicinal edge, becoming something almost clean, like salt, like the ocean through the window she couldn't see. He opened his eyes. "Elena, I'm here. Did you just save my life? I just gave your body the antidote to a poison you should never have been given. Whether it's enough depends on whether your cells can repair the damage." He sat up, slowly. He looked at his hands. They were steady. For the first time in months, they were completely, perfectly steady. He turned them over. He closed them. He opened them. He made fists and released them and watched his own fingers obey him without hesitation, without tremor, without failure. And then he looked at her, and his eyes were bright, and his mouth was open, and he said, "You knew. From the beginning. You knew what was killing me, and you knew how to stop it, and you stayed, and you held me, and you gave me your body, and your time, and your career, and your safety. And you never told me because telling me would have gotten us both killed before you could finish the work. Yes. How could I not love you more for that? How could anyone?" The door opened. Commander Holt stood in the frame, flanked by two shore patrol officers. His face was a mask, his dress whites were crisp, his eyes went to Lee on the floor, to Elena kneeling beside him, to Maria Santos standing by the desk with an empty syringe in her hand. "Captain Vasquez," Holt said, "you are in violation of 6 sections of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, 3 articles of the National Security Act, and your specific orders as documentation officer for this program. You have disclosed classified material to a foreign national, administered unauthorized medical treatment, and compromised the integrity of a joint service operation." He paused. "You will be placed under arrest and held for court-martial proceedings." Elena stood. "Commander Holt, in 1965 you oversaw Project Meridian, a covert program that administered experimental neurotoxic compounds to a 19-year-old civilian without his knowledge or consent. You buried the records, you reassigned the personnel. When that civilian began to show symptoms of neuromuscular deterioration 18 years later, you arranged for his consultation with the Navy specifically so you could manage his decline through a Navy physician who was administering a second-generation variant of the same compound under the guise of treatment. You have been poisoning Bruce Lee for 18 months. You framed the program as a legitimate training consultation. You assigned me to write the report that would provide cover when he died, and you did all of this to protect a career built on the classified exploitation of a teenager." Holt's face did not change, but his hands did. They moved to his sides. They opened and closed. Elena watched them the way Lee had taught her to watch, through the body, not through the words. "That is a fantasy," Holt said. "You have no evidence." Maria Santos stepped forward. She held up a small digital recorder. "She doesn't need evidence, Commander. I've been recording since I walked in the door. 17 minutes of audio including Captain Vasquez's full recitation of the Meridian file and your response, which notably did not include a denial. It included the phrase, 'You have no evidence,' which any military prosecutor will tell you is not the same thing as 'that didn't happen.'" Holt looked at the recorder. He looked at Maria. He looked at Elena. And then his mask broke, and beneath it was something old and desperate and small. It was a different time, he said. The program had authorization. The science was sound. We were trying to create something extraordinary. You did, Lee said from the floor. He was standing now, steady, his hands at his sides, open still. You created me, and then you tried to destroy what you created because it was more than you could control. Holt stared at him. I should have told the boy, Holt said quietly. In '65, I should have told him what we were doing. He might have volunteered. He was fearless enough. He stopped. I was a coward. I've been a coward for 18 years. The shore patrol officers, who had been standing in confused silence, looked at each other. Maria Santos pressed a button on the base intercom and said, "This is Petty Officer Santos requesting JAG Duty Officer and Base Security Commander to Admin Building C, Room 114. We have a confession in progress." Holt did not resist. He stood in the doorway as the security team arrived, as his rights were read, as the handcuffs closed around his wrists with a quiet click that sounded nothing like the movies. He looked at Elena one more time. "Your report," he said. "What will it say?" "The truth, Commander. All of it." They led him away. The room was quiet. Maria squeezed Elena's arm and slipped out, closing the door behind her. Elena and Lee stood 3 feet apart in the humming lamplight. His hands were steady. His skin was warm. The iodine smell was gone. In its place was something clean, something alive, something that smelled like salt air and warm cotton, and the beginning of a life she had not planned for. "You were trying to tell me something," she said. "Before you collapsed, you started a sentence." He crossed the distance between them. He took her face in his steady, certain hands. He looked at her with the total presence she had felt in the gymnasium on the first day, the attention that required his entire being. "I love you," he said. Full, complete, unbroken. "I love you, Elena Vasquez. I love you for the step you took forward when everyone else stepped back. I love you for the file you carried, and the cure you kept, and the career you burned to the ground so that I could stand here and say these words with hands that don't shake." She put her hands over his. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you since the gymnasium, since the silence, since 20 men were on the floor and you were the only thing standing, and I thought, that is the loneliest man I have ever seen." He kissed her, slow, steady, his hands in her hair, her hands on his chest, his heartbeat strong and even beneath her palms. Outside the window she could not see. The Pacific Ocean moved against the shore of Coronado in the dark, steady and constant, and the air smelled like salt. 6 weeks later, Commander Richard Holt was convicted by military tribunal on 14 counts, including assault, fraud, conspiracy, and violations of the Geneva Conventions regarding human experimentation. He was stripped of his rank and sentenced to 20 years at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth. Project Meridian was declassified. Compensation proceedings were initiated for all affected subjects. The Navy issued a formal apology that used the word unconscionable 3 times. Bruce Lee returned to training. His hands never trembled again. He completed the consultation program, submitted his methods to the Pentagon, and watched as his techniques were adopted across 4 branches of the military as standard close-quarters curriculum. Elena Vasquez was not court-martialed. The JAG investigation concluded that her actions, while technically in violation of her orders, were undertaken to prevent an ongoing crime and preserve human life. She was reassigned to the Inspector General's office with a commendation that her file would carry for the rest of her career. Maria Santos was promoted. On a Tuesday morning in October, Elena stood in the gymnasium in Coronado and watched Bruce work with a new class of operators. He moved through them with precision and grace, his hands steady, his feet bare on the polished floor. He caught her eye across the room and his face changed. Not a smile, something deeper, something that lived in the body rather than the face, and she felt the baby kick for the first time, and she put her hand on her stomach, and she thought, he stepped forward too. When everyone told him to step back, he stepped forward. The gymnasium smelled like clean air and warm skin in the Pacific Ocean, and the room was not silent. It was full. If this story broke you, hit subscribe. We drop devastating stories every week. Next time, the silence will find you again.